Going to Canada.
We're live.
I saw that.
We are live, thank you. Gentlemen, welcome. This afternoon, we're reviewing H204. Speaker is listed as Matt Coda.
Yes, thank you. Matt Coda, Managing Director of the Vermont Vehicle and Automotive Distributors Association, which is a trade association of new and used car dealers in the state. With me is Mitchell Jay, who owns Central Vermont Auto Mart and has spent many years selling and fixing cars in Vermont. We have concerns with the bill and questions about our practices going forward should it become law. And Mitchell is in has an opportunity to talk a little bit about what happens when tires are changed and how they're disposed of and how we do it, and we think in a very responsible manner, and questions about how this bill would change that practice. Mitchell.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to come and spend a few minutes. I took a quick look at this bill the other day and read through it and just kind of found a lot of it problematic and everything. But I think just to go over some of my concerns as I read the bill from the perspective of a tire dealer, as we sell tires to people that come in and get their vehicle serviced at our location. And then we're also a large purchaser of tires that go on to used vehicles that we then retail here in the state of Vermont. So, you know, the first thing saying that come up to me, this bill is this talks about the sale of tires, where other states I'm familiar with, sometimes the sale of tire includes the tire that comes on a new vehicle or a used vehicle too. This seems to just deal with it. As long as that's the intent, I'm fine with it. I just threw that out there. Because I did say, well, does this apply when I put a tire on a used car to recondition it? Because I'm actually the seller and the purchaser of it at that point in time, and the customer ultimately buys it and pays the purchase and use tax on the sale of the property. I also looked at it and I talked to my daughter, because I got to admit, I'm not out in the service department as much as I used to be. So I said, has the philosophy changed from when I owned a couple new car stores to now owning a couple used car stores in the state? And she said, no. She says, the vast majority of our customers, Dad, they pay the $5 we happen to charge to dispose of the tires. And she said, I really don't, they just don't want to deal with them. And so I don't know if that's just a function of when I had new car and used car franchises, that the customers that come to us usually have a feeling that our prices are a little bit higher than maybe a small independent store, but they're willing to do it for some of the conveniences like location, comfortable waiting room, you know, free snacks and rides to and from work and everything. And maybe those customers are also the ones that are more worried about the stewardship of our environment, and they're happy to pay the $5 a tire to get rid of it. So, you know, with that said, I backed up though, and I started looking at the bill saying, well, where's the problem? So one of the first problems I saw in my own mind is trying to define manufacturer of tires versus distributors of tires and how I've purchased them. So I don't buy any tires from a manufacturer, though I do buy them from distributors. But I want to describe that a little bit as I see it, the tire industry, and it's changed quite a bit the last, say, 5 years from when I was first in the business in the 1990s. You know, when I first came in the business, we knew who the distributors were. There was Vermont Tire here in Montpelier that I sure had a chance to talk to you. I mean, we bought tires from him. We got them from Max Feckelstein down out of New York. There was a few distributors. It moved to a place where we now have large tire stores that cover several states, and they have both retail and wholesale. So my tire distributors now a lot of times are Town Fair Tire, Tire Warehouse, but it goes a little more that the internet has finally come along, so that when we're looking for some tires that you usually, if you want to buy them, you usually associate them with the tires that Continental, Michelin, Pirelli sell. They're expensive tires. They're usually 19, 20, 21-inch tires, run flat tires. They're expensive. They're $450 or more at retail. We have the whole new avenue called, there is a lot of Chinese manufacturers now that sell these things not through distribution, but just through tire stores that are on the internet. And the price can be pretty substantial on those tires. I mean, we can buy those tires sometimes for $120, $140 if we go with one of those brands. So I go back to say, what's the manufacturer? I'm not sure on a lot of those tires. I don't know what factory they were built in, and though there's a DOT number on them, a lot of times I got to go to their website, try to figure who manufactured them. I know what brand they are. And that was my big concern with this bill is there are probably a couple hundred brands of tires. I had a hard time figuring it out. I tried all different methods. I finally settled on using Chat, Gemini i8, and their methodology was to pick some of those large ones like Tire Rack and Tire Easy. And they both came up with about 200 different brands of tires that were offered from those two main tire stores. So I've got a bill that's saying that I'd be faced with it makes it illegal for me to sell a tire that's not on the list that ANR keeps of manufacturers. I just find that really problematic at the counter to sit and figure out, okay, I know the brand here. It's Sumo Tire, it's Sumoco. Who made that tire? Are they on the list? Did they not pay their registration fee this year, so they're not on the list, and I'm stuck with obsolescent tires that I can't sell? I look at the small tire thing and say, okay, how do I know if they've sold 5,000 tires? Who knows when they sold $5,000 worth of tires and they now need to be on the list? Call me gun shy, but in 30 years of doing this, I've ran into enough trial lawyers that always find some way to either use the Vermont Consumer Fraud Statute or some statute to put a really big hammer over your head. And you usually end up writing a check somewhere for 10, 20, 30,000, say, just go away. You can't prove your case, but I can't afford the legal bill anymore. So the bill talks about the manufacturer being responsible, but I say, okay, I sell a tire by mistake from somebody that's not a licensed manufacturer. What's their hammer? I know what the trial lawyer is going to say. Oh, it looks like we can do a private right of action against you. That must have been their intent. It doesn't spell it out. I have concerns about keeping that list current. This committee is probably aware of it. So Vermont, having California emissions, has certain PZEV vehicles that have a 15-year, 150,000-mile emission warranty. You know, when we first did that, the answer was ANR will have a list. You'll be able to go there, look up the test result code off the label and know if the car's covered. I haven't seen that list updated in almost 6 or 7 years. So when consumers come in now, we're at a real loss trying to figure out what ULEV and ULEV2 and PZEV, and there's so many initials now that we're back to the whim of the new vehicle manufacturer. They'll tell you whether the car is covered or not. So I look at that as a history and go, I'm concerned, can we keep the list current enough too? The other thing comes questions like, because of the volume that I do, most of my volume, over 50% of it is with one's tire store. Right now, because of their volume, they pick up the used tires for me and they recycle them. I'm sure their cost of doing it when you're Town Fair tire with, 70, 80, 90 stores is fairly low. I do have tires that don't come from them. Usually if it's only 8 or 10, they'll just take them for me because of the volume. If I get more, I call the group up out of Albany that's a licensed hauler and I pay them to come down and haul the tires out for me and everything. I have questions on this bill of, if I was still collecting them, am I allowed to charge a customer still? Or does this become a bill that takes away the incentive for customers to pay? Instead, we put it onto these tire stewardship programs. I have questions of what the cost will be because, as I read this bill, I'm thinking to myself, okay, who's going to create these tire stewardship programs? I see a couple of nonprofits jumping up and they're still going to need money from the manufacturers, and those costs will get passed on to Vermonters. As close, I believe, a limited selection of tires, because I think some of your small to medium manufacturers will say, let's just not sell tires in the state of Vermont. So I don't have a lot of advice. I always hate to testify about what I see as the gloom. I like to say the solution. I will say on my years, I've also been on the NADA, the National Auto Dealer Association Board of Directors, for a few years. I mean, I look at some other states, and I'm sure you have, but, I see states out there that impose smaller fees, $1, $1.50, $2 a tire on every tire sold. And they use that to try to clean up some of the legacy problems. I don't know if that I know that helps us probably with our legacy problem. I don't know how we correct the behavior to get everybody to return the tires. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to ask them, but I just, like I said, I had a lot of concerns in how we really do business versus what this bill would create, and the fact that I think it would really limit the choice of tires, or limit my ability, especially when it comes to if you're going to do it the right way and look up if the tire's one you're going to be able to sell. Because I think there are plenty of stores that will just say, we're just going to keep on selling tires. Coupled with, I'm sure if I'm pretty good. I'm here in central Vermont. We don't see a lot of people drive down to New Hampshire to buy stuff. But I know in my store down in White River Junction, we'll give people a tire price. We constantly see them, I'm just going over to Lebanon and pick those up or something and everything. So. If you had any questions?
Thank you, and I apologize for being late, and you might have answered this already, but I'm wondering if there are any states that you know of that are doing this successfully. If there's a way to do it, to deal with these, leftover tires and how to recycle them or dispose of them.
Well, I didn't, I sat and I looked at some stuff like that Florida does, but again, theirs is really just trying to get rid of they try to create programs that they can use the money to do cleanup sort of things with, not try to make sure every tire comes back. Similar like we try to do with a bottle bill. But again, a deposit on tires like a bottle bill is really problematic because as it is, I see people, and I find this hard to believe, but I think being in the car business, meeting hundreds and hundreds of people a year, I literally see people that drive to Maine once a year because they can get 10 cents for their 5-cent returnable and they take the entire pickup load up with there. So if we're talking a $5 return fee on tires, we will have truckloads of tires coming from New Hampshire into Vermont. And that's a concern even with this bill that, I think along the border state, you've got a little bit of worry of a guy going, I don't really want to throw them on the junk pile, but my brother lives over there in Derby. Let's just have him drop them off for me. It'll help the tire dealers with their percentage factor, but it doesn't really solve our problem. I couldn't find any that are having a real success at trying to get every tire returned today.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that have tried to do stuff, it seems to be, when you read, it's just problems. They're having trouble trying to make the program operate. It's very expensive. Though I will say most of the programs I've seen have been the state trying to administer it. But again, with that said, somebody has to administer it. So if the state doesn't do it, I see nonprofits forming and they'll become expensive to administer too, and it will get passed on in the cost of a tire.
Any questions? Representative Christie.
Sure. I usually don't ask a lot of questions, but today I have a couple. Thank you for coming in and testifying and offering your knowledge of tires. It's much appreciated. It really is for us to understand what happens in tire purchase, return policies and where they go. The goal is to keep them out of our rivers, roadsides. The reason we have legacy piles generally is somebody's taking those tires for nothing. People are dropping them off there. Reference some of the agricultural locations where they stockpile tires, put them onto silage. Suggestions, and the person that doesn't have the $5, and I know it's hard to believe when you're buying tires, but the person that doesn't have $5 that decides to throw it away somewhere or dispose of it improperly, what's the incentive? What can you suggest for incentives for those people so that they don't throw the tires away? That's what we're trying to cover. If it's not a deposit at the time of purchase, if somebody's EPR is not paying for the return of that tire, how can we keep them out of our rivers and roadsides?
So I make an assumption, and sometimes my assumption is not a good one, but my assumption would have to be that the lower income person is probably going to dispose of the tire improperly, though not all the time. And I certainly have some customers that barely scrape by and still somehow, we feel bad sometimes, we'll take care of it, because I know that a certain amount of them are not paying and all we're doing is handle them. So it's not a big deal just to take them for some people that really do cry, though it's a very few people. But, and I hate things where we have programs where businesses have to figure out people's income levels, but it would be nice if, you know, we could create a system through a flat tire fee that you turned around and then rebated, you know, certain people to try to get them to turn the tire in. And again, I don't want to sound negative. I'm sure there's somebody making 150,000 a year that still throws his tire every once in a while now over a bank. But I'm trying to think where I see the real problem. The customers I see that really have the most problem are the lower income customers, that getting rid of 4 tires or $20 is a decision between getting rid of the tires the right way or maybe buying that, you know, the extra food they need that week or something. And so I don't know the answer, but again, I think if we had a smaller fee, then, you know, I've said, I've seen the states use a small fee and be able to clean up legacy problems. Maybe you still have a small fee and you also say, we can come up with a program the state can run to rebate those people at a lot cheaper cost than I think this program. This just seems like this is going to be a very, very expensive program to administer.
I don't disagree with that. That's why I'm looking for an alternative. But how can we incentivize those that are really depositing their tires where we don't want
Representative Norris.
Along those same lines, thank you for your presentation and coming in today and being and sharing all this with us. Yeah, it's very helpful. Is there already a fee that goes along with the sale of every new tire in Vermont?
No, not that,
There's no per tire fee, no cleanup fee, no for
no.
tires. I feel like sometimes when I go to buy tires, I get charged a
Well,
tire fee.
Disposal fee?
Yeah, but when buying new tires.
Well, you may have, so I got to admit that, you know, I think every business today has become very creative. It reminds me of when I go order a takeout order at McDonald's. And now, that's a bad example. A takeout order the other day, though, at a BurgerFi I was at, which is the same sort of thing, a chain down south, and they got 18, 20, or 22% tip. And I'm going to stand there and wait for my burger. You have to purposely put no tip. So I have seen some dealers actually just load up the fees, like unless you complain, we're going to charge you for a disposal fee and just assume you're leaving your tires. So you could see it. I mean, I've seen a couple of dealers that charge for valve stems on every tire, a tire disposal fee, just assuming that you don't want your old tires back. And I'm sure you'll find a
There's no
tire
state
dealer.
law.
No, there's no state law right now doing it. And that's why I mentioned the new and used car tires, even in the state, because a lot of those states that do some of those cleanup programs, like I say, they'll assess a fee not only to sale the tire, but also saying that every new and used car has 4 tires on it. And but I'd be careful because I'm in a state where the governor says no fees, so. But you need money to solve the problem.
Just real quickly, so maybe you know this, Matt, can you bring, do we have like, you know, where we have, people can bring batteries or, you know, there are days that you can bring batteries or computers or something. Do we have anything like tires?
Like an amnesty day where you
Well-
can bring it in and not be charged like you do with the batteries and.
Yeah,
and PCs.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah,
I don't know that we have those here, with the solid waste districts, but
Right.
yeah, I could see how that would be compelling for someone who has tires in their garage that just wants to get rid of them and may
Right.
not know how or may not want to pay for it.
but do you know how they're funded? Because then they must have to pay someone to take them.
Yeah,
to
I don't know
dispose
the
of
answer.
them.
That's a good question, Ron.
Representative Pritchard.
Yeah, so I was in the automobile business for quite some years too. And so we dealt with tires all the time. I thought we managed it good. You know, when we, you know, there was a disposal fee we had. And normally on a switchover, you know, a lot of the customers we would see, you know, on a regular basis. And, you know, part of what we did when we serviced their car, we did the MPI like everybody does now. And and would list the tread depth on the tire when it left. So they would know if, next time you're gonna, your next visit, you're gonna need tires. And we would have that discussion with them, as I'm sure independents have the same discussion with those folks. And I think our capture rate was pretty good. I mean, I can think of very few examples where we were putting, tires back in a customer's car that had less than 2/32 on. They were happy to pay the fee. It was disclosed up front. And we would do the same thing. There was some folks where it was a challenge. And, we would just take care of that, take care of their tires and move on to the next thing. So, part of what I've heard with this is, we're really looking at a very small percent of the tires that are out there. I think the testimony that we've heard is that it's over 90% of these tires are accounted for. And I have some of the same concerns that you do from being on the automotive side. Nothing's free. Once it's imposed, the manufacturer is either going to pass it on, you're going to pass it on, and at the end of the day, it's the customer that pays for it. The customer, the taxpayer, whatever. So, I share the same concerns that you have with this thing.
And I appreciate that because I mean, that's the number my daughter makes, about 90% of our customers, pay the fee. We waive a few. Your concept's a little more unique sometimes too, because and you can tell me my experience was that most customers don't want to slog those things home and put them in the garage. So again, maybe an amnesty day instead where you help fund it with some kind of fee would also be for the ones that, for some people, the $20 is important enough. They'd slug them home and figure how to get rid of them on another day or something too. I just thought that the rebate type of thing was an instant. It's easy to say, yep, I qualify and here's the coupon or something. But again, it's that 10% of those tires creates one heck of an eyesore and a problem, but it is a small percentage of people that are trying to use, in my mind, this bill, a sledgehammer, trying to take care of a very small problem.
Yeah, in high level, and Mitchell referenced this, which is the concern that if they don't join the stewardship program, there's fewer choices for the consumers. And competition is good in terms of pricing. And then if a retailer, a local retailer, happens to have a tire in stock and that manufacturer is either bowed out of that program or not, that they somehow face a private right of action from a trial attorney. That is a concern for all our local businesses that just want to put good tires on their customers' cars. So, but that said, there's also acknowledgement that we don't want to see the tires on the side of the road either.
Just one more quick one.
Representative Boston.
There's no technology about trying to retread tires, right?
That was, I remember in the 70s, that's the only type of tire I knew how to buy. It was a retread. I don't see it except for on heavy duty truck tires today. I don't see anybody doing it on anything but just tractor trailer tread tires today. The other concern with the bill I didn't mention, but again, it goes back to the manufacturer side of it. When I see administering this bill, even when you look at trying to figure out what a manufacturer's share of tire sales is into this Vermont, that's pretty good when you think of tire manufacturers like Goodyear, Firestone, the big ones. But you have some brands too that sell only certain type of tires. I mean, my example is I see customers buy Hakkapeliitta winter tires, but I almost never see them buy any other type of Hakkapeliitta tire.
Yeah.
So you would get a company that could be very compliant because they don't sell many tires, but it doesn't mean, there's some problems trying to figure out what their share was. I don't even know how you figure out what their share into Vermont was. Because again, it goes back to how we get these tires. It's not like you can round up 8 distributors and say, tell us how many you sold of everything. It's but even if you could, that formula starts to be problematic with tire manufacturers that don't carry a full broad line of tires.
I think when a retailer said, I don't even know where my tires come from, that the manufacturer is so big, then I was trying to figure out how this could be implemented if you don't know who the manufacturer is.
And the other side of Representative Austin is the manufacturer sells to the distributor, but doesn't know where, if the tire ends up in New Hampshire, Vermont, or
Right.
California.
Right,
So
right.
it's, we want to go further upstream, away from the customer, but at the same time, you go so far, then there's no nexus to the state.
Any other questions?
Somebody's in trouble.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you so
Thank you for your
much.
time.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you giving us the time today and everything.
Thanks for coming.
Going back and play out the snow. It was cold snowmobiling up in Derby. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll be adjourned until